Welcome back to Brothers in Boots. My name is Mike.
Jeff. Chris.
And today we have an episode on tongues and kilties. This is going to kind of give you the idea of the different kinds of tongues that exist, what leathers are ideal for tongues, weights, so on and so forth, and then kilties. Kilties are what you see here. This is very common in P&W boots to protect the much lighter weight tongues for hardcore work conditions. And we're going to go over a couple things when it comes to these, is kind of how we modify our own, things you can do to keep them from sliding down, make them fit better, so on and so forth. What bourbon are we doing today, Jeff, before we get started here?
Four Roses limited edition from 2014.
The limited editions. Even nowadays on the overhyped bourbons, the limited edition's usually always a really good release.
Four Roses is it's pretty rare, and it doesn't have the secondary value as most. This one's 111.8. They're really hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
But at least when you need them, you can pick them up on the secondary for a fair price.
Yeah, they're not too bad. I've only gotten one at MSRP, and that was the 2021 limited release. But that was a damn good bottle. But like you said, usually very rarely do they go for more than 100 or 2 over MSRP.
2013 is my favorite. I have one kicking around somewhere. I think it's somewhere else in the house.
It's funny, we were in Vegas last week, and a buddy of mine actually got an 11-year Willet, the Friend of the Devil edition. It's a even numbered barrel, so barrel 4100, and it's 66.6 proof.
I could have a whole conversation just about Willet.
Yeah, that one was good. We cracked it open just so he didn't have the angst to sell it on the secondary, because that particular bottle is going for about $1,200 on secondary, but we got it MSRP at $400, so it was, for what Willet normally puts out these days, it was a fantastic pour.
I would have, did you take a picture of it?
Yeah.
The back labels say distilled in Kentucky or just bottled in Kentucky.
I'll have to look on that one. I'm not sure. I didn't look at that close. I have a picture of the front. I'll have to ask him for a picture of the back. He's got it at home, so I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'll get that to you. Good.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. I was just going to go into starting, but go ahead.
All right, ahead.
All righty. So on tongues. Tongues are an interesting one because they really do make or break the fit of a boot. If any of you guys have ever had shinky in matching shinky tongue that has not been split, oof, the first 200 hours, that is hell. A 9-ounce tongue is not the way God intended, let me tell you. The Indonesians love to do that. So whenever you get Indonesians in shinky, I suggest having smooth grip pliers to help crimp that down early. Otherwise, it will wear into the side of your foot. But generally speaking, tongues come in multiple types. The most common in the ready-to-wear world, and even in the cordwainer world, is this is my pair of custom crafts, is what we call a sewn-in tongue. A sewn-in tongue has 0 gusset, meaning it's a loosey-goosey tongue. And then if you look right here, you'll see it is sewn in. Oh, if I can get my fingies out of the way. It's sewn in across the top right there. And that's mainly for repairability. In the style that Dennis does, this tongue can be replaced without taking the boot apart, which is nice. But it comes with some drawbacks. Having this no gusset, while it's probably the more comfortable of the designs, means dirt, dust, debris, water all get in through these gaps, right? So you walk in ankle deep water, you're going to get wet socks. There's no getting around that. A full gusset can prevent that for a certain amount of time. Obviously, it's not waterproof.
It also means that the tongue can move left or right.
Yeah, these are made to measure, right? So these are made to measure, so they do come together correctly across the board, so this one doesn't move. But that does not mean you're ready to wear won't do that. A lot of cobblers, like Steve from Beato's Leatherworks, will actually take this stitch line right here and sew it into the tongue on one side so that the tongue can't move. That is extremely common in dress shoes, especially Oxfords.
And for ready to wear, it's very unpredictable when it's when it's going to go left or right. I mean, you could get the exact same pair of boots, same model from the same builder 8 times, and there might just be one of them that's going to have the tongue not fit right, or it could be most of them.
Yeah, it's very pattern dependent. Yeah, it's super pattern dependent, super dependent on how accurate they were when they put the boot together. But that is the most common, especially in the ready-to-wear world, is that no gusset. As we move up in the scale and the quality of craftsmanship, you tend to go away from that, except for specific styles like that one. This model here is called the Model 1. It is technically a dress boot model. He uses a short gusset, which Chris is going to show here in just a second. He uses a short gusset in what he calls his standard or his work model. So you're going to pull up that pair of helm, Chris. This is what's known as a short gusset. This is done in a slightly different way where you have a gusset a little higher up. This is almost uniformly to protect for water. Keeps the tongue in place. The tongue still can move with the top pieces. It's less likely, but it's really there specifically to keep water, dust, dirt, debris from getting to the inside of the boot. Now, I will notice that particular pair has a little gap in the bottom right that it looks like stuff can get into. But, you know, it is a pair of helm, to be specific. That's not a particularly high-end pair of boots. And that, shockingly, is a ready-to-wear example that has a gusseted tongue versus a non-gusseted tongue. Just to, you know, really spit in the face of my previous comment.
Yeah, considering where helm is at in the ready-to-wear.
Yeah.
Stratosphere.
They're a step above Thursdays, a step below Red Wing.
Yes.
So, like I said, short gussets mainly there for a little bit of water protection and to keep the tongue as still as possible. As still as it can be without being a full gusset. Next, you have what's known as a 3/4 gusset. This is usually one that stops with the top 2 or 3 eyelets. If you want to go ahead and show the pair of sandbore you have there. Oh, you have Truman first.
I'm going to do the Truman because they're a little bit lower.
Yep. So this is kind of your 3/4 gusset. It's not all the way to the top, so that you have some flexibility around your ankle without having to do a trifold, but it does give you the water and dirt protection higher up. The biggest downside to the 3/4 gusset is this one's a little bit nicer because the tongue proportions are a little better. But on that Truman, what you'll find is the 2 big gaps that you see in that thicker leather, those are going to press up against the side of your foot as they tuck in. So in the full gusset world, we have 2 kinds of folds, one that's known as a C-fold that you do with whites and one that's known as a trifold that you do with basically everybody else that's not whites or the whites work models. And this is a C-fold style, but as you can see, there's enough extra material there. It's going to U-shape on the sides around your foot, and you're going to have to slowly work to where it flattens in and doesn't push against the side of your ankles and instep. In the thicker leathers, you're going to find in the heavier weights that is going to be a harder break-in and probably one of the worst parts of the boot. The Indonesians, if that had been a pair of shinky, would have done exactly that with an 8-ounce leather, which is going to create a very thick fold that is going to really fight against pressing in. I actually have a pair of smooth pliers that I use to crimp mine in real good.
There's this new quad fold that I started doing. And I don't know why. It's a short thing. This is a 6-inch, and I've got some 5 inches now. And I just can't get the full tri-fold out of it. So I kind of came up with that.
It's a funny thing really that's mixing a C-fold with a tri-fold. That's really just combining the 2 methods is what that's done. I have little lady ankles, so like on my little 6-inch boots, I can have tri-folds literally this big. As you can see, it's a solid 3 inches both directions. And yes, these uppers do almost touch.
It's still keeping the extra leather between my foot and the laces.
Yeah.
And it's also keeping the leather out from between my foot and the hardware.
Yep.
On the sides, which big mistake in my opinion when people do that.
Yeah.
Lots of people will complain about pain there, and
yeah.
I'll look at the fold and be like, yeah, well, that's why.
Yeah, and it's also because where another thing Jeff's talking about is that doubling up helps because these little pieces right here will eventually cut into your tongue, the backs of your eyelets and hooks. So doubling and tripling up on that leather preserves the life of the tongue. And the tongue is a wearable part, especially in something like this pair here. Yeah, exactly. You can see where they wear it. At Kilties, you'll notice it immediately. Like you can see right here where the Kiltie, where the eyelet cuts in real bad right there. So the more you wear it, the more often you're going to see it. But it is a wearable component. I think it's every 2 rebuilds they tend to want to replace the tongue because it's usually damaged enough. If you can get enough life out of your uppers, depending on what you do, you might not ever make 2 rebuilds. Your uppers might just be too torched at that point. But it is a wearable component. It's going to lead into Kilties, which we'll talk about next, and kind of the importance of Kilties. If it wasn't clear, this is the full gusset. What me and Jeff just showed is the full gusset. This is real common in workwear. You're gusseted all the way to the top for maximum protection. It is a much lighter 2 to 3 ounce leather in a chrome tan variety. You can get these in veg tan. It is a harder break-in. It does suck more, and it will wear faster. Chrome tan is the correct application here. While I'm a big proponent of veg tan everywhere else, this is one piece that chrome tan is your friend and is the correct leather for the application.
So is there any particular reason other than just personal choice that someone would choose veg tan for a tongue?
They want a harder break-in for no reason. Ask me how I know.
It's
experience.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing that I've thought about quite a bit and actually talked to some people about recently. The reason why you'd want to do the veg tan is because you want a matching tongue, because you think it's important to have a matching tongue. Well, if you get a full-size Kiltie, you don't see the tongue. So is it really that important? I mean, one's a contrasting example because the boot's green and the gusset, the tongue is black. But when it's laced up,
yeah, you don't see it.
You're not going to see that. I mean, it's green all the way up. But some people think that that's cool. And if you're doing a 3/4 gusset, like some of yours are, and you don't really have the fold going on, so that makes it a little bit easier to be tolerable.
Yep.
But not only are these chrome tanned and thin, but they're also a much softer leather.
Yeah. Very.
Which arrives at because of the chrome tanning. But because it's softer, it actually wears better and is more comfortable. So I used to think, wow, I really like to have a matching tongue. And it was like, man, it seems like the thing to have. And I really wish I could have it. And the builders I was choosing weren't doing it. And now that I've thought about it more, I wouldn't want it anyway.
Yeah,
if somebody told me I could have a thicker, stiffer tongue, I think I'd still choose the softer one because comfort's more important and doesn't get seen anyway.
Yep. And he's seen my Pueblo tongue that Frank's did, the matching Pueblo tongue that I had split down to 3 ounce. It doesn't look pretty. It creases harder. It wears more in spots. It doesn't even match the uppers anymore because it gets so much extra wear from movement. It's a whole shade darker.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Mm-hmm. So it was a cool idea. It was novel. I did it the one time, spent the extra $45 in leather, had it split, sent to him. Nah, not worth it. Not worth it at all. I'd even argue that while I like the matching rolled tops, it is nice to have that softer tongue leather in the rolled top so it doesn't cut into your ankles near as much. Because that same pair has a matching rolled top in the Pueblo, and the Pueblo is pretty stiff stuff. Like most people think, oh, it's a veg tan, it's this, it's that. Pueblo is actually stiffer than the Seidel work leathers that they use on the temper scale. Yeah, it's like I got that Pueblo jacket recently, and it's a stiff jacket.
I was gonna ask.
yeah, it's a bit stiffer. It takes a little bit more movement in it to get it moving. Like I've noticed the arms are quite a bit tighter and stuff when I move around and stuff. So I'm waiting for the tunneling to really start working in on that. But obviously it's 110 degrees in Kansas right now, so not wearing it anywhere but the air conditioning, which is a good thing too, because the jacket came the day I flew to Vegas, and my dumbass probably would have taken it to Vegas with me and tried to wear it in the 120 degree Vegas heat. Bring it in faster. Be fine.
Sure, as you're going to the hospital from dehydration.
Yeah. The amount of drinking we did, that wouldn't shock me.
You could give in on the break-in and mink it.
I wouldn't. The green's way too
No.
beautiful to fuck with it that way. So,
Yes, absolutely.
but
Really a serious statement. I wouldn't want to break down my fibers like that.
yeah. Yeah, like I said, it'll break its way in, and it's a fucking cool jacket. I don't know if I think I sent you pictures of me wearing it, but it's like I
Is it
said,
lined?
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's wool tartan line. So
And it's a perfect match too on the coloring.
yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, moving back to tongues, I have one correct weight matching leather tongue that I had Frank's do, and never again. It's not worth the extra break in, especially adding a Kiltie in on top of it, because contrary to popular belief, Kilties need a little bit of break in too.
Oh yeah.
So doubling that up was just wholly unnecessary. But on that note, so tongue weights in your no gusset to quarter gusset, tongue weight isn't quite as big of a deal. You generally don't want it the exact same weight as your upper, so you don't want it what we call vamp weight, but you could do it vamp weight, and it's not as big of a problem as it would be on a 3/4 or full gusset. But generally speaking, there isn't a whole lot of reason, short of you needing specific stiffness for a no gusset tongue, that any tongue should be above 3 ounces, 3.5 ounces. 2 to 3 ounces is kind of the ideal tongue weight of what should be a softer leather. And chrome tanning being more durable than veg tan is a good reason why you would want to use that there. A little bit more water resistant, a little bit more abrasion resistant. It's not as puncture resistant, but your gap should only be about this big. So if your gap's only this big, you don't need to worry near as much about puncturing through that tiny gap. You're more like, especially if you're wearing pants, almost all of that tongue is going to be protected between your pants and your kiltie. You don't need the puncture resistance there, which is really where veg tan beats out chrome tan. About the only thing it beats chrome tan out, short of more moldability. If I can speak English. And once again, we mentioned vamp weight. Vamp weight is just whatever weight your vamp or your uppers / quarters are. So when we say vamp weight, we just mean literally they cut your tongue out of the exact same hide they cut the rest of your boot out of. Not an industry term. It's just really a builder's term. And if you're not talking P&W, most of them will call it quarter weight, which is your uppers. Uppers are also known as quarters in a lot of boot making. But say you do want a matching tongue, and you do want it in the same leather for whatever reason, you can't get out of your mind, there is a process known as splitting, that if they happen to have an in-house splitter or you have it professionally split, you can get a hide split down to the correct weight for that. And this is just a machine that some of them are manual splitters, some of them are electric, and it just runs the hide through and splits into 2 pieces, so you get a suede cut and a top grain cut. They'll use the top grain cut for your tongue. So Rocky Mountain offers it. I think Springfield Leathers offers it, and I do believe Maverick Leathers offers some splitting services, but if I remember right, I think Maverick splitter's a little bit smaller, so you ain't going to be able to do it on a full hide. I think Springfield's the same way. I think Rocky Mountain might be one of the few that can actually do a full 22 square foot hide through their splitter. Then obviously, like Wicket and Craig, Horween, all the big guys have splitters. The leather manufacturers can get split. So you could always order a hide in that particular weight. I know, I think it was the Mammoth leather that Frank's ordered some extra tongue stock in 4 ounce for to have matching. I think there was another one besides the Mammoth.
The Mammoth.
Yeah. So.
Now, what you're talking about is what, more of the P&W makers? Have you found the Indonesian makers can do the splitting like that?
They use vamp weight. It's all vamp weight. That's why I caution people when it comes to stuff like Shinky, because all my Shinky pairs, I have had a hell of a time breaking in when it comes to that. Smooth pliers are your friend.
I haven't priced it, but I think it's an expensive machine.
Yeah, it is.
I also
very
wonder
expensive.
how much space it takes up. A lot of these places don't have that much space.
It's a ton. It's literally like the cabinet sanders that they have in carpentry. The belt fed ones that are like 3 feet wide by 6 feet long. That's what a splitter looks like.
Yeah.
Looks almost exactly like. It's just not as tall. Yeah, tons
It's
of
like a
space.
planer, but for leather.
That's a perfect way of thinking it. It's a very big planer, and it uses the same amount of power and space. In feed, out feed, so on and so forth. And like I said, this is the basics of tongues. And there's a lot to this. You could get funky with it. Dennis from Custom Craft offers you to choose other tongue leathers. You can have a matching one, or you can have other ones. Guys like Frank's, usually, I think it's 2 colors normally, black and brown they have. Sometimes they have some others, then they'll announce when they do, but usually it's black and brown. You get to choose. Guys like Nick's Whites, you either get a matching leather or you get whatever they have on hand. They just choose. You don't get to pick. JK, I have no idea what those guys do. I really don't care. And Truman's an interesting one, because Truman, they've done matching ones, and they've also had times that they have a brown dress leather that they use specifically for tongues. So I had brown dress leather for the 2 pairs I did have that they used for tongues, but I have seen they are doing more in the matching, which is fine until you do something like horse rump that's a pain in the ass to break.
Right. Well, and it depends on the horse rump too, because there's some of it they'll do matching tongues and some of it they won't. So like the Guidi horse rump that they did in the vintage military horse rump they did a matching tongue.
Yeah, that stuff's real soft. I could understand it. Yep.
So, and when I asked Vince about it, that's what he told me. They'll use matching if it's soft enough to do it, but if it's too thick and the temper's too stiff, then they use the another leather for the tongue. And there's no talking them out of that. That is the way you get the boot from them.
Yeah, and it makes sense. That's the perfect way of doing it, because there's a lot of stuff people want until they put it on their feet, and that's an impossible to fix thing, because since they do a 3/4 gusset, you've got to unlast the boot, change the tongue out, basically relast the entire boot from scratch. You're better off selling the one boot and buying a new one at that point, especially from the manufacturer's perspective.
Another factor can be whether the company does runs or whether they truly allow more of a custom choice for the leather. You're ordering in a whole bunch of runs at once. You could order in 2 different weights, the tannery, so that you could be doing that. If you're doing, I want this letter, one by one custom, that changes everything. Being able to split it.
Yeah. If you even have the splitter in the first place, they would have to know to order it ahead of time, and the more custom you get, the less likely that is to be the case. So that kind of covers it for tongues. For the most part, like I said, you're looking for a chrome tan, somewhere between 2 and 3 ounce for most of your gusseted, up to vamp weight for sewn in tongue that's hopefully a matching or a good contrasting color. Every now and then you're going to get that, like, I made a purple pair of boots and both black and brown suck for it, so you might have to plan ahead on that one. And there are options. Like a good example is Yoshi. He always does a good job of finding like a nice 3-ounce chrome tan to go with his builds. It's a good theme. A lot of times it's like something just OA Leather Supply happens to have on hand that's like a no brand, very reasonably priced option that they can cut the tongue out of, that's soft and good to go. So there are options from that perspective, but yeah, I mean, matching tongues are nice and all, but 9 times out of 10 they come with more flaws than successes. Especially if you're using Kilties. If you are dead set against using Kilties, there's maybe a more reasonable conversation you can have from that perspective. But I don't know. As we talk about Kilties, you'll see there's lots of styles, including some no-show ones that are perfect for stuff like this. So, alrighty. So in Kilties, we have a couple different styles. This is a Kiltie. I showed it earlier. This happens to be a pair in blue Palisades, but a Kiltie is a piece that goes into your boot that protects the tongues. As you can see, I have a shell cordovan Riccardo Lava Kiltie against a black tongue with a black rolled top. This main purpose is there to protect this very soft tongue leather from anything that would happen to it from this point down, which is what's exposed from my pant legs. That's the main point of it. I like to stylize and make my shit look cool with it because, I like dressing my boots up like a pair of Barbies. But, some people use them for what they're intended for, which is work. So I'm going to show a couple of examples here. This is what we call the casual style, which is mainly what I run. I don't like the jagged ones. On the screen now, you're going to see what's known. This is particularly a packer style, but it's very similar to a logger style. This right here is known as a welder style, which is just a very eccentric one. And these can extend all the way to the top of the toe and protect the top of a welder's boots from slag and from splatter just from welding and grinding in general. And then Jeff showed it earlier. This is the tip of the front and his modifications. But if you can show it on screen real quick, Jeff, the full length Kilties that you have on your green zucchinis. And this is just instead of the regular 6-inch Kiltie, which is this size, that's an 8 to 10-inch Kiltie that, just matches whatever, well, it'd be 9 to 11, but it just matches whatever length is necessary to make it to the top of the boot.
Being a little bit short.
And they will be. Once they fold and crease, they're going to lose some height a little bit. Yeah, there's a 6-inch full length there.
One's totally full length.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's pretty close to full length is there too. And so, like I said, if you're 5-inch boot, you want at least a 6-inch Kiltie. 6-inch boot, you want at least a 7-inch Kiltie. So like add an inch, and that inch is really there. So as it like flexes and moves, you don't lose too much length this way. If it's a really stiff leather like that zucchini, maybe add an extra half to a full inch for the kind of deeper creases that it's going to have. But those are the different styles. Like I said, it's just the look of them. Most people stick with the casual or the rounded off. Like I said, you see a lot of the logger ones. The logger ones are there specifically to keep branches from slipping under them for people that are walking through like the forest and the woods. Obviously, that's a work style. They do eventually got to curl up and get, Cthulhu-looking teeth, kind of like little tentacles that are going all different directions, which is the main reason why I don't personally care for them. But I also work in a data center. They're there to protect me from doing something stupid like dropping sharp shit on my feet, not, walking through a burning forest. So different jobs for different purposes, so on and so forth. Yakety yakety. But they're a big part of protecting your tongue. Now, like I said, the reason the majority of them come out in the 6-inch length instead of full length is specifically because your pant leg is protecting the majority of the tongue. It's really there to protect the pieces that your pant legs are not protecting. That's important because most people doing extreme jobs are wearing pants that are, cut proof or protected against the kind of job they do, not, a pair of selvage blue jeans, right? Obviously, selvage blue jeans provide some protection, but it's limited. And, I'm sure people are going to their jobs at the rock quarry in their $300 selvage jeans. I'm sure that's a thing that happens.
You're going to get somebody on the Discord that's going to say, I do that.
Shut up, Chris. Oh, good old Discord. Now, you're going to run into a couple really weird things that happens when it comes to these Kilties that is kind of important to know. So preface this, Jeff gets his without holes specifically for his size. I get mine with the Dale spacing of holes because they work just fine for my size. The ones that come stock, I don't know who the fuck these work for, but it's not anybody on this call. These these are so close together. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to curl like this in your boot. And it's because these holes are so close together. The second thing is it's going to slide up and down and pull forward without it. So the reason Jeff gets his without holes is because he gets his holes way the fuck out here on the edges. So he punches them in himself way closer to the edges. That way it'll, 1, sit flat, 2, it won't want to move up and down, because part of it being curled is what allows it to move up and down. Number 1. So this is a stock Frank's Kiltie. This is no different than the stock Kiltie you get from Nick's and JK. White's is a little different. It's a straight square. I absolutely hate that Kiltie because not only does it move around a bunch, when it gets any folds in it, it starts popping out from the laces because it's not wide enough to be held in place. This big bulbous back here is to keep it held in place around your ankle. They just use a straight one. Can't stand it. I don't know who likes it. I don't see hardly anybody using it, but I'm sure someone's going to chime off that they absolutely love it and it's the greatest Kiltie known to man. It's not. So I use mostly Dale's Kilties. I send him leather. He stamps Kilties out to me, mails it out to me and my friends. And every now and then there'll be some left over for him to sell. This is the way it comes standard. I do not wear my Kilties this way. And there's 2 particular reasons why. This happens to be a piece of shell cordovan, so I'm not going to fuck with it too much. But when you wear it this way, it will get instead of like curving for the holes being too close, you'll get the edges bunch up real bad, and that is because for most openings in the way the PNWs do the U, and I'm going to show a picture that Jeff gave me of his boots. So you can see this kind of crown that exists. This is known as the crown or the horseshoe of the boot. You have a gap that exists here, and in that gap, the Kiltie has to slide through it. And what'll happen is these edges will flare up. So what I do first when I get them, and I'm going to show you, is I slice down the sides to make the Kiltie go through straighter. Next, I have a dedicated pair of dividers I use to scribe this distance here and to cut it out so it's slightly shorter, so that one, they'll sit flat, but number two, stuff won't get under them and they're more the correct length and the corners don't start curling up on you. Now, I do a second pass of that caliper on monkeys, which you see this way. And this gives me this nice, flat, close look, because otherwise it would be this far out here, which I don't think looks good, and it lets stuff get under it. Once again, this is there to protect your tongue. The tongue in this boot technically starts here at the third eyelet. The crown exists under here, but you do want to protect that crown, because you get splits or anything into that crown, it tears your tongue. Boot has to be unlasted, relasted to fix the tongue. So I have a process in place that I do to do this. All my Kilties go through Kiltie surgery. I don't put in anything stock. This is my plain toe setup. This was for a pair that this is actually SB foot. This is a pair that I was going to replace a Shinky pair that I was about to give up on the break-in on on a pair of natural chrome XL mock toes that finally got decent enough that I was like, okay, I'm not going to end up using these. So they were done for that. This is in the casual style. I don't have them sitting here, but on my monkeys, sometimes I'll do what's called a no-show style, which is where I'll cut an inverse U here. So I'll take this Kiltie right here, set it this way against it so that it goes just up against the holes, and it creates this inverted U shape so that you don't see it hardly at all, and it looks like a boot without a Kiltie while the tongue is still protected. I only have one pair that I've done that on, and I haven't wore that pair much yet, so it wasn't a very good example for this. It's the Frank's prototype Blackborough Walloper, Blackborough Butter Walloper. That is kind of... It's sitting there waiting for the Thunderdome this year. So
hey, Jeff's got an example.
Yep. He held it up for a second.
Yeah, for a split second.
I wasn't sure if it made it on camera or if you were showing something else.
No, it was on camera. They showed it as I was holding it up.
But
yep.
yeah, that one's inverted.
Yep.
Inward.
And it's just
one of only two that I did that with. Actually, I did that with these as well. You look, this Kiltie is stopping right there at the third eyelet because the vamp goes up this high, so it doesn't need to be protected any lower. And for this style of boot, I didn't want a Kiltie showing anyway.
Yep.
So I did that crescent cut so that the lace would go through this third eyelet, but it actually wouldn't be seen a little bit higher. I'm still protecting my tongue / gusset while totally hiding the Kiltie.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see maybe an inch of that before his pants. And it's not going to be super obvious.
My pants have a wide opening. You actually don't see it at all unless I'm sitting down.
So if you had really narrow ones, you might see maybe an inch of it, but nothing more. It's the same as this style here. This style would be entirely ruined by a Kiltie. But it's also a sew-in tongue, so there's not a whole lot of reason to need it. You know, the kind of sharp style that Dennis uses is, you know, got a very good top view that you wouldn't want to necessarily ruin with a Kiltie, especially since it's got a vamp weight tongue. But I mean, I would like to say we've made it more popular, but we are noticing, at least in the PNWU, a lot more people making their own Kilties or, you know, doing Kiltie surgery, as we call it. I know both me and who knows, maybe Chris will start one day too, but me and Jeff don't put a single Kiltie in our boots anymore without going through Kiltie surgery.
And it's not always the same surgery, like you said, but you know, I don't have any holes put in my Kilties anymore until I get here. And I also find that my Kilties don't even end up, the holes don't even end up lining up.
Yeah. So we talked about how on sewn-in tongues, how they have a tendency to move with the pattern. It's the same thing with the fully gusseted tongues. They don't always get the uppers 100% perfectly aligned with the horseshoe. Sometimes the machine runs it a little bit. Maybe one leather flexes a little bit more than another leather. So you need it a little bit off to be able to make those adjustments, depending on how much of the Kiltie you want to show.
These holes aren't the same distance from the sides as each other, and they're not the same distance from the bottom from each other, but that's where they actually sit, right underneath the eyelet. That's literally where they're sitting, underneath the eyelet. So there's no spacing at all between, and I think that's what's holding my Kiltie in place, my boots, more than anybody else's. I mean, that's getting used to this new light.
Yeah.
That is literally right underneath that eyelet in both situations.
Yeah, it makes it. And the biggest thing is that really helps it sit flat. Yeah, it helps it sit nice and flat, and the flatter it is, the less likely it's going to move because you have more rough out making contact with the pieces. I don't have the problems personally in Dale's. Dale's spacing seems to be about perfect for my size, but keep in mind that spacing will not be perfect for every size and every builder. It just happens to be with the majority of my pairs that I use Kilties in, which are mostly Franks, that this is perfect for me. And it seems like we just lost Chris somehow. Oopsie poopsie.
Probably pop right back.
Yep.
I did a video on this channel. If anybody wants to go check it out, just on what I've done with the Kilties. But so you can see like how I did it, but basically I put the Kiltie in so that it's not laced in yet. It's just sitting there so that it can be moved up and down. And I put some laces in, some shorter laces, so that they start at the second row instead of the first row. And then I'll move that Kiltie around till it's exactly where I want it. And then through this empty eyelet on each side, stick an all pointer or something like that in there to mark the leather.
Oh, did we lose Jeff? We lost Chris for a second. Now we lost Jeff. Basically, he marks it so that he can punch the holes out and have it kind of perfectly set flat. There, now he's back.
So, yeah. So sometimes it's to make the eyelet stay in place, to make the Kiltie stay in place, so that there's no spacing. Sometimes it's you're not seeing the lace quite as much. Sometimes it could be because of the movement of the boot. When the Kiltie is lower down, it has a tendency to be forced upward more, or to curl more, as Mike said a few minutes ago. And there's the arcing. You showed my green pair with the...
Yeah, I'll put it up on screen again.
So I cut down the edges on that so that it wouldn't arc upward.
This is to kind of keep it sitting flat so it doesn't have a curve to it. And this is just spacing on that crown. Like I said, every boot's going to be a little different on that crown spacing. That's not really a pattern thing. That's an execution thing, and it depends a ton on the leather.
There are different... Let's see. I put up a bunch of random pictures here.
Yeah. Let's go through them. So this is kind of like a fancy welder style tongue right here. This is a logger one that someone is doing some handwork to kind of give it a cool look. This is a standard logger style Kiltie. These are a short, almost no-show style Kiltie that's just barely out. That's a contrasting color with some stitching. In this left boot here, I'm going to zoom in on it. You can really see kind of what the jagged Kilties can do to your vamp. These like 5 lines here, that's actually from using a jagged Kiltie on that vamp, is what's caused those little marks there in that toe. This is a nobleman apothecary mix between a logger and a packer. This is kind of a combo style. In the way the holes are done in this one, this is one you'd want to do. It's called a logger knot, which is this right here, where you kind of do a loop through to help hold it in place. Here is a.
I think that's actually Alex's pair. Shout out to Alex.
Yes, that is Alex's pair.
He wanted credit.
Yep. This one right here is like a frilly, like fancy one. This is probably ignore this boot because this is a wingtip B&W boot with a red collar top, but this is kind of like a frilly style that's becoming more popular. That's purely for show. This is a flat cut. This is a person that really needs to put their own holes in. Part of the reason it's sliding forward is because of how close they are and how big that vamp is wide. This is another kind of no-show style with a slightly different style logger knot. This is done in such a way to keep it from sliding down. This is making an extra loop for the pass-through so that the Kiltie is not pushed forward at all. And this is a slightly different style where someone's done a ladder lace with their logger knot. This is a logger Kiltie as well. So a couple of the different styles and the stuff that exists out there. A Kiltie's purpose is to protect your tongue, but it's really kind of just like everything, become a bit of a fashion statement. That's why we're starting to see some of these wild Kilties, like the one with the little frilly Davy Jones tentacles. They make a ton of styles.
Like 4 different styles with those tentacles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people are getting
and
real wild.
Adams, did you show them Adams ones, the burgundy ones with the wave?
Yep. Yeah, the one that's kind of meant to be a stylized welder style tongue. Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of variety. I've only seen one person that's ever put those patterns on like that one guy did in that photo there.
Yeah. That's definitely not as common. I mean, the Nobleman's Apothecary ones are fairly popular. Dale's are fairly popular. The hand-tooled ones from guys like Monroe Leather are getting more popular. I think BM Grizzler, the saddle maker, makes a couple of them too to go with his hand-tooled belts.
Knobs 2 pair that actually have multiple pieces of leather sewn together in there.
Yeah.
Cause the stripes. In the orange and black and the black and white.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see it a lot more, even with guys like Frank's, where they're doubling up on some of the Kilties, where they'll take one leather and put another leather behind it. Kind of gives it a cool stylized look, but also kind of extends the life of the Kiltie, gives it a little bit more layers of protection. That's really common in people who do like rock quarry style work, where we're talking very jagged rocks. So there's a place for all of this.
I do have some Kilties that are 2-layer. This one is 2-layer.
No.
This green, you can see on the inside of the boot that it's struck through. Or at least it looks struck through.
Yeah, it's finished on both sides. That's an interesting one.
If you look at the Kiltie here, it's actually layered and stitched together.
Yep.
This is still stitching gives an additional extra nice look there too. I decided I wanted to back it, have it be thicker.
Like that zucchini really needed it.
No, it didn't. It was over 9 ounces, so it didn't need it. You are right, sir.
Yeah. Someone else might also in this chat have a pair of that same zucchini. English Bridle, the boot leather that is still debatable on how good of a boot leather it is. Judge is still out on that one.
And if you are cutting your Kilties, like you're trying to cut, instead of cutting it straight, if you're trying to cut a curve, in addition to the way that Mike does it, I'll look around the house sometimes for stuff that happens to have the same outer edge that I want, so that I can get a good razor cut going around that.
Yep.
That's one of the things
can of suit, spool of wire, can of tuna, Smiths.
I had to cut these Dales downward. They were too tall, so the Smiths can ended up being the right diameter for that.
Oh, that's the red, white, and blue ones, huh?
Yeah. And if you are using a razor blade to cut that, be aware of your angling of the razor blade when you
up
do
and
it.
down, up much as possible.
Well, actually, not quite up and down. It actually should be angled. Actually should be angled kind of this way, not a lot, but just a little. So all like just not quite up and down, because you want to make sure that you're not seeing any of the edge of the leather after you end up cutting it. So if you cut under just the littlest bit, then when you're done, all you're going to see is the upper leather instead of seeing
if it struck through, it won't matter so much, but on that T-core one he showed there, it's important. Otherwise, you're going to see lots of the excess here. You want it to be as up and down as possible to not get frills, but you want a tiny, like 2-degree undercut. What you don't want is to undercut this way or take too many passes this way, because you'll get these like fluffy edges that you then have to sand off.
Yeah. And you can do some pretty cool leathers on the Kilties alone if you want. This one here is a elephant that I haven't actually used yet. And this one here is a giraffe. Put in at one point.
Yep.
Thought it was kind of neat to have something exotic to be able to put in.
That way PETA comes after you. You could always be a cool kid like me and, spend hundreds of dollars on shell Cordovan Kilties. Really waste that money.
It's something I have not done yet.
Forewarning for anyone who gets shell Kilties, they do squeak like a motherfucker for a while. Just as an FYI. This really glossy, fancy finish leads heavily to squeaky, squeaky, squeaky.
Good to know.
Yep. These are probably most people's best option. These big, thick, like Palisades, bighorn bison. They're more of a pain in the ass to cut because of how soft it is. So very, 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 very sharp knife. But these are kind of like the perfect, like they're thick. They eat up some, for people who, can't get a C width and need it for their uppers. These are perfect for that. They're nice and soft, super malleable, as limp dick as it gets. Right. But
it was really hard to cut through.
Yes. Yes.
So
it's got real dense fibers. So see how
really
fibrous
dense.
it is.
I had to pull a brand new blade. I still had to go across it several times, and cutting through but the punch was a lot harder as well.
Yep. These fibers on the back of this hold on like a motherfucker, and it's being like 9 ounces doesn't help. But yeah, it's got real thick, fuzzy, rough out. But the flip side of this is these are even not doctored, these are much less likely to move because of how thick and fuzzy the back of it is. It's super grippy. So there's that too. Alrighty. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed.
Did we do it all?
Yeah.
Form, bunker.
Yep. We got it all. Shortening, no-show, modifications. We did it.
Yep.
As usual, like, comment, subscribe. Any questions you have, please put them down below. We'll be glad to answer them. Just like in the previous video, someone asked about the edge technique we talked about, so we made a video on it. Chris did the Tokenol edge, which is what I do with all of my boots. I find that one particularly more waterproof, so someone asked, they wanted a guide on edge dressing, so we did a guide on edge dressing.
Yeah, one thing we'd also like to do is rate you guys' collection.
Yeah.
So if you have a nice boot collection, let us know in the comments and where to find your boot collection, because we would like to review it, and you want to get our opinions on it.
Yeah. Show you off on the internet a little bit. See how much of a cool kid you are. Like I said, if we get enough of them, we'll do it. Maybe we'll do our own collections as well. It's something we would kind of like to do just as a kind of fun point in time commentary on kind of where people's stuff is now, what's happening, where it's going. We're coming up, we're going to be doing some stuff talking about like the consequences of MTOs, and then the ever controversial office workers versus blue collar workers, the raging debate that's big in the industry right now, especially on most of the different forums of the dudes who actually use their boots for what God intended, and those desk jockeys that keep the industry afloat with their expensive boot pairs these days.
You mean riding cavalry horses?
Sure, yeah.
Isn't that how most boots started?
It's how the engineer started. Old
Yep.
Civil War cavalry boots got cut down and belts put on them to help them fit a little better since they didn't have the full calf. Gabbard from Creosote has a fantastic write-up on his website that talks about the history of the engineer if anyone's interested. So, as always, thanks everybody for watching. See you on the next one.
Thank you. Launch 'em.